Good afternoon. Welcome, and thank you, David. The cheer. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. My name's Anita McKillican, and I am the treasurer of the Canadian Club of Toronto. Please join me in welcoming our webcast viewers. Viewers, thank you for joining us. Our club wishes to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional lands of many Indigenous people over the centuries, and most recently, the Mississaugas of the New Credit, First Nation, on whose territory we are gathering today, and we're grateful for the opportunity to meet on this land. We'd like to thank DMZ Sandbox at Ryerson University for opening up this awesome space for us today. We're so glad to be here. So, where do you like to shop? Is the mall still an option for you, or like me, do you increasingly prefer an online experience? I think we can all agree that the retail experience has changed dramatically over the last decade, and more change and disruption is on the way. We're about to learn more about what's in store for Canadian retail from two industry experts. But first, I'd like to acknowledge the support of today's sponsor, McKillican Canada. As a nonprofit, the Canadian Club of Toronto counts on our valued partners to further our mission, so we thank you. And we're also pleased to partner with Peopletail for today's event. If you have any questions, thank you to Peopletail. If you have any questions for our speakers today, we will have a microphone for use later in the discussion. And now it's time for our business card draw. I'd like to invite Rebecca McKillican to come forward to assist. Where is the... Oh, first come forward with the business cards. The winner is Julia Ivory. And what has she won? She's won a bottle of Conspiracy Red wine from the Foreign Affairs Winery. Is she here? There she goes. Now, time to introduce our speakers. Rebecca McKillican joined Well.ca 7 years ago. Previously, the Harvard MBA grad worked in the retail and consumer group for a private equity firm in New York. Rebecca, who has also worked at McKinsey, is currently a valued National Bank of Canada board member. She's a passionate leader, creating videos and blogs of her favorite products that she actually uses with her family. Rebecca frequently speaks about her business and the business of retail. We're sure to hear some amazing insights today. And Rebecca is joined in conversation with Donna Bishop. Donna is the resident fashion columnist for CBC Radio, the host, founder, and producer of the Fashion Talks podcast, also founded Green Beauty. So she has some tough questions for our guest today. Rebecca and Donna, I am pleased to pass the Canadian Club of Toronto podium over to you.
Thank you so much, Anita. Yeah, yay, Anita. Thank you, everyone, for being here and spending your lunch hour with Rebecca and I. Rebecca, before we get into the kind of meat of the discussion around disruption and retail and wellness, can you just give us a bit of a snapshot of what's going on at Well right now? I know you've been there for 7 years, but Well has been a disruptor of its own in many ways. Right. So what was the company like when you started, and where are we at today?
Everything continues to evolve. I think we see that as consumers, we see that in business, and if it's not broken, one of the great things I once read was, if you haven't broke it in 2 years, break it, because it needs to be broken. And so we're constantly breaking what we're doing and rebuilding and evolving the company. So where we were 7 years ago is very different from where we are today, and if I look at the consumer profile of 7 years ago versus today, it changes. It's very different. Your consumers are constantly growing, and I think that's one thing that's in retail. Historically, we've looked at consumers in a very static lens. This is who the consumer is. But every cohort of customer that comes on board looks slightly different than the last. In a very short order, you've got a fundamentally different consumer. And you see the change in demographics of consumers. And they interact, shop, think, communicate very differently. And so you're constantly needing to reinvent yourself and what you're doing to be relevant in their lives. And that's a privilege to earn that relevance in their lives.
What was the suite of product offerings like at Well when you joined 7 years ago, and how has that evolved to now?
The Well.ca's slogan when I came on board was Canada's online store. And it effectively was trying to sell everything to everybody. And I think it's tough to be everything to everybody. And in looking at our consumer base at the time, and as we still do today, is who is our consumer? And that consumer is changing. And so we put a stake in the ground about who our consumer was, and that meant saying goodbye to some consumers, but it also meant being much more relevant to other consumers. And that fundamentally changed the economics of the business. It changed our go-to-market strategy, and it continues to change it because, again, those consumers are constantly growing and shifting. We're all different people than we were 7 years ago, and how we shop and how we work and how we communicate. And businesses need to keep up, and when they don't, it leaves room for disruption for other entrants to come in.
So what sort of products, I just want to give everyone kind of a clear look at, where Well was, where it is now, and the relationship with McKillican, because that's obviously a very exciting part of the Well story. Was it mostly beauty, skincare, like the sort of things you'd find in a Rexall, and now it's evolved into more lifestyle? Would that be a fair way to describe it?
It would be an absolutely fair way. I think it started with consumable products that you could get at a drugstore and that you could buy anywhere, into a very focused category of products for a specific customer. So if you look at the customer and say, well, how can you sell both, baby shampoo and also sell very high-end probiotics, and also sell, sound machines or light therapy machines for adults. Like, how do you sell all of that? And it's not about the category, it's about the customer. And so we did sell a plethora of products, and if you looked at our assortment today, we actually have even more products than we did back then, but it's more curated. It's curated to that customer, the woman who is 25 to 45. It's curated to what's going on in her life. We have many more beauty products. We have many more skin products. We have many more vitamins and supplements. We have many more lifestyle products, from yoga. All of that is relevant to that customer segment. And so we've really curated the product to health and wellness and grown with the customer. I would say baby was a much bigger portion of our business 5 years ago. If you had a baby 5 years ago, your child's now 5 years old and you have a different set of needs. And so we talk to you differently than the person who's just had a baby or just found out she's expecting. And so again, the curation changes it, and the focus of the assortment and our go-to-market strategy.
So, million-dollar question why we're here today. What do you see as the biggest disruptor in retail? Like, what is the factor that you have your eye on, that you're constantly trying to keep tabs at, because that's the thing that's moving the industry the fastest?
I think it's the consumer. The consumer is disrupting and the consumer is winning. And that's by, if I look at Well.ca and our partnership with McKillican, that's been a very fundamental and amazingly positive shift in our growth trajectory, because it allows us and enables us to interact with that consumer in a much different way, in a much bigger way. And so as we think about the consumer disrupting retail, how do you then be part of the consumer's life every day?
I find that fascinating, because I think if we were to take a poll, it might be technology, like, is the e-commerce versus bricks and mortar, is that still part of the disruption? But you're saying, no, it's the consumer that is the real disrupting factor. How have you seen that evolve?
If you look at the value that we as businesses are providing to consumers today, it's significantly more than what a business would have provided 10 years ago. Just use the example of, we'll ship free to your house, right? We'll do the work of picking and packing those products and send them to your house for free. And as a consumer, that's a value to you, and you're getting that for free, whereas 10 years ago, you had to do that hard work yourself. And free is the name of the game to play. It's the price to pay, and the consumer is winning. And the companies that understand that they need to continue to be relevant and add value are the ones that are winning. And that's why you see so much disruption in retail, because they're just moving too slow.
And do you see that, you've described the customer as being, a woman between like 25 and 45. Is she using one particular channel, or are you finding that it's no longer about channels?
It's not about channels. And again, it kind of speaks to our relationship with McKillican and being able to grow with brands like Rexall, because it's one person. It's not about the channel that he or she uses. It's about, I want to interact with a brand in all different parts of my life. I'm one person, treat me like one person, don't treat me like a channel.
But retail used to be so simple. You had to play, right? Like, I wanted something, I went and found it, I bought it. Like, it used to be a very simple business channel.
Yeah.
And now, like, how complicated is it? Like, what are all the plates that you need to spin?
So I bet if I asked this room, who's a happier consumer today versus 10 years ago, how many of you would raise your hand?
That depends on the day.
Well, true.
Am I shopping for shoes
True.
or am I shopping for skincare?
In general, I would say probably most people would raise their hand. They've got more tools, more options. And if I ask the room again, how many of you within your businesses, whatever that business may be, would say that today is easier or harder than 10 years ago? How many of you would raise your hand?
Oh, harder.
Harder, right? It's much harder. And so who's winning here? The consumer's winning, and businesses are having to work harder and do more to be relevant in people's lives. And I think it's a privilege to be part of people's lives, and those that are agile and can see how the customer is changing their behaviors and capitalize on it are the ones that are going to win. You cannot stay still.
So tell me a little bit about how, because we've talked a lot about the consumer and it being a trusted part of our lives, and they're the ones, leading all the decisions. A shift that I've really noticed in the retail landscape is retailers are now content providers, they're community builders. They're much more than just a place to get the stuff you want and need. I notice Well does a lot of that as well.
Yeah.
Has that always been part of the strategy, or how have you seen that kind of element of retail that I presume was not a huge part of the pillars of considerations 7 years ago?
No, and I think that if you want a transactional experience, go to Amazon. It's very transactional and it works. If you want a different type of experience, retailers have to come up with a different way of engaging people and being part of a community. So how can you develop that community? An example I would offer is we have different community groups within Well.ca. And where do moms go to diagnose a rash? Do they go to their doctor, or do they take a picture of their kid's rash and put it up on a Facebook group and say, do you guys know what this is? That's what they do. Yeah. And that's where they get their content from. And so if you're there and then you say, hey, we've got some great content on eczema, like this is just plain old eczema, here's some great content on it, you're now helping them connect to a community, you're providing them content, and you're also offering a solution in terms of a convenience of, and I could get it from Well.ca and sent to my house in 2 days, and I'm really happy. And so I think that with over 50% of product searches now happening on Amazon.
This is we were talking about this earlier. Let's just unpack that again. 50% of product searches are happening on the Amazon website, no longer the Google website. That's a really significant shift. And
absolutely. You need to be relevant in a way that I'm not just going on to buy the product. I'm part of your life. I'm there when you need me. I've earned the respect to be on your homepage of your smartphone, because you're not going to win if you can't even get a chance to that customer because they're going straight to Amazon. So, and people are looking for community, right? We all want a sense of belonging. We all want to engage. We're social animals. It's what drives us. And so how do brands, you look at something like, Peloton, they've created a community of users that feel part of that business. And people are looking to brands to build and to engage in that community and feel like they belong and that they can contribute and that they can also receive from it. And so we've, at Well.ca, have developed a tremendous amount of content and engagement. I'm looking at Carly over here, who leads our content team at Well.ca, because that's what consumers are looking for. And you're providing value to their lives, and we have seen the engagement with our customers grow substantially. And I won't even talk about social media because that's another game changer.
How are your consumers engaging with you? Are you getting feedback? Is it purely through social channels? What is that dialogue like? Because it's not just transactional. Are you getting that kind of real-time feedback about things?
Absolutely, because if you're not getting it real time, then what use is it to you? And so in every social channel, every email channel, every soliciting feedback channel, I always tell our team, the email with the results from our weekly NPS survey, not just the scores, but the comments are the most important email you can read in a given week. Before revenue, before anything else, because that's what the customer is telling us every week on how we're doing. And so this is the leading indicator of how they're feeling, what's relevant to them, what's working for them. And it's not only about what's not working, it's what's working and do more of it. And so you need to listen to your customers, and that constant feedback of information is going to make you better and is going to force you to change constantly. And so that's been so critical for our success at Well.ca and for building that community of trust. And providing value into their lives.
Do you think, because you deal specifically within the health and wellness category, I feel, as a parent myself, and I know you're a parent as well, are there other parents in the room, just so we can get a sense of who's here? I feel like not necessarily the responsibility, but the interests parents have in being a part of the understanding of child's development, wellness. It's not just about always taking them to the GP. That's a whole kind of category of trust and responsibility that I feel must be a bit of a bedrock for so much of what an organization like Well.ca does.
Absolutely. It's a lifestyle, and it's a trusted group of a community group. And when you have all of these questions that aren't specific to a general practitioner in terms of, my child is doing this today, should I be worried, or is that natural for a 4-year-old? Like, you're looking for that feedback that only other parents can give you, and the trust you place in these community members that you've never met, that you're following what they say, is incredible. Like, if I just personally said, how many of you here spend the majority of your content do you take from standard media sources versus social channels? How many of you take more of your content from social channels, be it LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, take more content from there than you do from standard media channels?
YouTube, Twitter.
Yeah. You spend more time each day on those channels than you do on traditional media. And so, again, building those communities and investing in those communities brings so much value into people's lives.
So that, to me, is another interesting disruption, because it's no longer about the C-suite thinking, this is what our consumers want, we're going to give it to them. It's the consumers that are really driving a lot of the product choices. Are you finding that that is really influencing the products that are offered, the categories that you evolve into? Can you talk a little bit about, because that's a big disruption.
It is a huge disruption, and what we've seen at Well.ca is the trend has only been trend-driven purchasing continues to be amplified every year. So, for example, something takes off, friend A tells friend B, and it goes viral on social media. If you don't have that product in stock, so last week, we had a shout out by Jillian Harris, who's an influencer. Yeah. I love this Kula product. She posted on her social, on her Insta stories. Literally within, I think, 10 minutes, we were sold out of the product.
Wow.
And we're scrambling to get it back in. We still had a decent buy, but you need to be on that, and you need to be taking bigger bets. And that's where Well.ca, we can win against somebody like an Amazon in the fact that we're closer to these trends and we'll buy into them. But you need to be trend driven, because the world is just moving that much faster. And if you bought something 6 months ago and you put it on your shelf for holiday, I'm telling you, it could be no longer the product of choice.
Well, and I think the notion of trend-driven purchases, like, I think the wellness category is particularly susceptible to that, because we hear about bone broth, we hear about collagen, we hear these are my trend-driven purchases of late.
I think you might have purchased some of them.
But that's a very new thing. Like, how are you staying on top of this? Like, is it literally just hoping your customers are giving you the right feedback? Like, I'm rolling into the fetal position on your behalf, just like thinking about it.
If you asked our buyers, how much of your time do you spend on social media? I would have said our buyers 3 years ago, maybe 5% probably even less, 2% of their time they spend on social media. Our buyers are spending a significant amount of their time on social media so that they can address and see what's going on, and we can be there as the customers being there. And so, again, it's a different source of where do you get your information from. You're not going to AC Nielsen and saying, what are the rankings for my top 3 brands in this category, and I'm going to stock them. Yeah. Like, that's so old, you can't even go there. You have to be where the customer is.
Now, this relationship, this trusted relationship, how do you walk, because there's some landmines that you need to navigate in terms of, self-diagnosis. Like, as soon as you're in this health and wellness area, how do you gauge the information that you share? Like, because there's a lot of sensitivities and legalities for sure to monitor.
It's a great question, and it's something that we are constantly very careful of. And I see David Simmons here in the room looking at me, because we've got people who make sure that we are on point. But we're not all, a la Gwyneth Paltrow and Goop, right? We're not out there.
Chuckle goes across the room as Gwyneth is mentioned.
Yes. So we're not on that side. We're all about information and choice. So we're not directive. we're about, here's, some information about turmeric, about collagen, about keto, because we know what people are searching for. That's the other beauty thing about online, is we can see what people are interested in and what they're searching for, and so we can provide relevant information, but it needs to be balanced, and we focus on that. We are very careful in the health and wellness space. We do not want to overstep our boundaries, but I think that you can very quickly ruin that trust, and it's something that we know is what our business is based on, and so we need to hold that close to our heart at all times.
Well, and you touched on something as well that I think is so fascinating, is the way we can gather analytics and information behind the scenes is another place where things are just moving so quickly. Is there, how are you culminating that data and keeping on top of things? She's like, I don't do that.
AI, no.
Yeah.
I'll use another
But
buzzword.
AI is becoming, right? But AI is another consideration. As we get Alexas and Siris and Google Plays, and shopping is something that they are all kind of touted as being something to help us with.
Yeah.
It all is part of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, there's art and science to it. So, there are tools you can use to determine, what are the personalized recommendations for you. And anybody who's gotten those picks from Well.ca, you can say, are they relevant or not? And we're continuing to refine and make sure that we're providing relevant information. And then there are the more scientific tools around, AI and how can you leverage that. And I would say, to be truthfully honest, I have not seen a retailer in an way, people talk about it, but have you executed on it in a way that's different from just the traditional algorithms on personalization in terms of people like you bought this, so here's what I recommend for you. TBD, that's one of the areas, I'll be honest. People touted it very big, but we'll see how people actually execute on it. But I think that it's important to apply the art and the science together, and we've always had curation, right? And so we're not just about, like Amazon, here's a list of products and go figure it out. You want to do keto? We'll tell you what are the most popular keto products and how you can put together a good complement of products in your pantry to support your aspirations with your keto meal planning. So we do art and science, and we'll see how the science continues to evolve and how we can incorporate that into the day-to-day.
Well, and that element of curation, I think, is something that is so important if you're trying to set yourself apart from the Amazons and the other kind of more transactional retailers of the world, because it allows you to work with more boutique brands.
Absolutely.
And that's, how do you find those gems that people will only be able to get there, or that, our friends out in the more rural communities, which is something else I want to ask you about, because there's our rural retail customers and our urban retail customers.
Yeah.
How do you speak to all of them, and how do you find those things that are going to be special for everybody?
So I think you raise a great point, and another disruption that's happening in the marketplace where these more unique indie and craft brands are disrupting the large CPG companies. And you see them reacting, and you can watch what they're all doing. But the consumer is realizing, I don't have to buy in my house what my mother bought. I can go out and make my own choices with my own information, using my social channels and all of my communities to find these products. And you know what? They can't be stocked in the shelf of your traditional grocer or your traditional drugstore because there's not enough room. But I demand, I'm looking for them. And so we're able to really help grow the businesses of a lot of these craft and indie brands, and provide them to the people, not just in urban settings, but out in rural areas, and almost bringing a whole new offering to these customers and grow the national business, right? It's not about taking share from somebody else. It's truly just growing the pie on these products. And a lot of them are better for you products that maybe don't have the same mass appeal, but people are looking for, and that pie is just growing. Like if I said to you 5 years ago that 6% of people are vegan, you'd be like, what? Like 6% of people are vegan and growing much faster. You just look at Maple Leaf that invested in a vegan plant down in the US the other day.
A&W, going with their plant-based burgers, and the beauty the beauty industry is being
fundamentally
incredibly shifted by notions of sustainability, of ingredient information, and gluten-free, vegan, all those things.
Yeah, and as the information gets out through all these social channels. And so I think historically, businesses and retailers were able to control the information, the flow of information, and now again, the consumer's disrupting, the consumer's winning. They have more information, they have more control, and they're demanding more and better of everybody.
And what are some of the other, executional things that you've had to really, I'm thinking of shipping time as a big one. Are there other kind of executional disruptions that the consumer has demanded that you're like, well, Okay, so we're going to do this now, I guess.
So we see their expectation rise every year. So what was good enough last year is no longer good enough. So they're forcing us to be better. And it's on everything from shipping time to the sustainability of your packaging. Like, we debate all the time, do we have those pillow packs that everybody else has, or do we go with the newsprint? We go with the newsprint because that's where the customer is. And it brings a lot of value to our customers, and that's what our brand stands for.
Does it ever bug you? Like, I'm just thinking, like, the consumer is now dictating the packaging of your shipping stuff. It's like, are you
100%.
kidding me? You know, all of a sudden, every element of the business has a consumer opinion attached to it. It's like, yeah, talk to me.
Yeah. The consumer is at the center, and if you don't reorient your business so that it's not about, a set of people in a room making a decision, but it's let's have a set of people in the room listening to the customer and coming up with how can we provide solutions to these customer needs. It really does democratize everything because you're all one team, you're all working for a common goal, and when you get the feedback from the customer that you're adding value to their life, you're bringing health and wellness into your life. And we haven't even really touched on it's now as part of McKesson, we're really thinking bigger and going beyond just health and wellness in the lifestyle standpoint, but how do we do things like virtual services and bring value to people's lives with that? And so there's a lot of things that we can do if you listen to the customer and you put them at the center.
Well, you touched on something that I'd love you to discuss a little bit more, because within the wellness retail landscape, we're seeing shifts with like services being offered in bricks and mortar places, be it from, injectables and things on a cosmetic level to things that are more wellness based from like naturopathic services and whatnot. So can you share a little bit about where Well is going with that?
Absolutely. And as we look at the customer, again, it's a lifestyle and people want health and wellness in their life, both for when they want to continue to be well and also in times where they have a need for any type of health product or program. And so how can we take that same mentality that we have around consumer packaged goods and say, can we bring it to them in the health and wellness space? And our move into virtual services, which is actually going to happen next week, is a step in that direction of saying it's not just about products, but it's, how can I talk to somebody about mindfulness coaching? How can I talk to a naturopath? How can I talk to a medical practitioner? How can I connect with all of these people and make that as seamless as buying a product online? And so I think we're taking our consumer mindset and we're really starting to apply it, and I don't say we as Well.ca, I mean we as Canadians, to the healthcare environment. And that's a whole nother conversation.
That's a whole other conversation. But we're going to open it up to questions in a couple of minutes. But the final thing I just want to hear your voice on is we hear so much in the trades and media about the importance of authenticity, making sure as a retailer you have an authentic voice, a genuine voice. How do you keep track of that? Like, it would seem, given the success of, the community buildings and whatnot, that, thumbs up, Well's doing a good job. But that's a really hard balance to maintain, because at the end of the day, you're a business.
Absolutely.
Trying to keep the lights on and make a buck.
Absolutely. I think that authentic brands are the ones that are going to win, and authentic brands build trust.
And what does that mean?
I think it means it's a brand that you can relate to as a consumer and feel like It's not some ambiguous brand out there that just what is it? What do they stand for? Who's behind it? If you feel like you can connect with that brand in many different ways, not just in the products you buy, the services that you get, but in that I understand who this brand is, and it doesn't have to be about one or two people. It can be about the broad suite of employees that are behind that brand. And we at Well.ca, yes, myself and some others create content, but we have lots of people in our company who create content. And it's about knowing who's behind the brand. It doesn't have to be the CEO. It can be all of the people that are supporting that brand and building that brand and feeling like you can relate to it. And I think that brings a tremendous amount of authenticity.
Do you ever fear that Well will be so big that it's not trusted? Like, there's always that fine line of, we love things that are a little bit niche, we like to help people, and then it's like, oh, well, now you're like Mrs. Smarty Pants. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's that balance of maintaining that authenticity and
Yeah.
that trust even as you grow.
Yeah, and I think again, it's not about one or two individuals, it's about the collective group. And so as we move into services, for example, it's how do we pick those service providers that work with us, and are they authentic, and do they represent the brand, and are they credible and trusted? And it's ensuring that the whole ecosystem, not just the employees, but even the partners that you work with, the vendors that you work with, all of those stakeholders authentically represent your brand, and using that lens when you choose all of those different stakeholders to work with your business. And it does, obviously I think about it as we continue to grow, but as we've continued to grow, I would like to say we've continued to even enhance the authenticity of the brand by putting more and more of the brand out there for consumers to interact with.
Okay, well, we're going to leave it there. I'm sure there are some people with questions, and Colleen will do her best Ellen, walking around with the microphone.
As you anticipate further growth, how do you acquire more consumers to be attracted to your website? What initiatives are you doing to attract your demographics?
That's great. It's a great question because customer acquisition is at the heart of retailing, and we're talking about retailing today, and how do you acquire those customers, and what do you know about the channels through which you acquire them? And so we look at it on a daily basis, which channels we've acquired customers and at what cost, and what is the element through which we've acquired them in that channel. And I can tell you we play with it every day. This is like a very dynamic exercise that goes on, and you see very clearly what works, what doesn't, and you have to quickly put the gas on when you see something working. And I'll use influencers for an example. We use influencers, some of them work, some of them don't, but when you see something that works, you've got to quickly go forward and go fast, because that opportunity may not exist 2 days from now. And so it's the ability to really truly understand at a very raw ROI level as to where you're putting your dollars, what are people reacting to and responding to, and really having the muscle to be able to flex it on any given day. And then I'd complement that with, if you have a phenomenal customer experience, that begets people talking about you, about that phenomenal customer experience. And then you start to get customers that look free to you because they come to you and you're not paying for them. But your existing customers are your best assets for additional customers. And how can you continue to look at those existing customers and value within the organization? How do I keep them happy and growing, add value to their lives, and increase my share of wallet with them?
In complement to that, just before we get to the next question, has the relationship with how you work with your partners changed over the years? Like, that must be another place where you're both contributing to that customer acquisition. And can you talk a bit about how you work with your partners now?
Absolutely. I would say the partners are even more integrated in terms of the importance of the business, and how you treat your partners, how you treat your employees, and how you treat your customers are so critical. And they're a valued part of the ecosystem, and you need to align and build relationships that are deep and that are mutually beneficial. And so what I can say is we spend a lot more time with our vendors and our partners than some of our competitors do, and that has tremendously brought a lot of tremendous value to our organization. And so just like you, in my opinion, if you're there is a business model to be very transactional, and Amazon has nailed it, and it is a good business model. If you have a different business model, you need to not treat your partners as transactional, but treat them as true partners, and continue to evolve them as your customers evolve and as you get the feedback from your customer acquisition.
I saw questions over here.
My question is related to the last one about customer acquisition, but I want to preface it by saying I have been a Well.ca customer, and Well.ca is a customer of mine. I run Envoy, the same-day delivery.
Oh, yes. A wonderful partner.
Thank you. My question is, after you have acquired those customers, and you do that through being part of the community, building and engaging the community, as well as having what they need at the right time, how do you keep them? So as a Well.ca customer, when I ordered something, I got a handwritten note saying, "Thank you for shopping with us." That to me mattered. And I think that mattered to me. So what else do you do? So one of the things that physical retail has going for it still is instant gratification.
Right.
And Amazon has nailed that as well, or they're getting closer and closer and closer to reducing that gap between the time I press the order button and the package shows up at my door.
Yeah.
What are companies who are not Amazon doing or can do to give their customers a similar experience?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question, and I think it relates back to disruption, right? Like on what level are you competing on, right? You can't compete on the same dimensions of an Amazon of low price and fast shipping. So what are you competing on? I can tell you for Well.ca, we're competing on breadth of assortment and customer experience. And so can we continue to bring products and that health and wellness lifestyle and add value to you in the depth of our products and the content that we have? And can we do it with a phenomenal customer experience that leaves you. I often hear from our customers, I get my Well.ca box and I get happy. I have a smile on my face. I see it on my doorstep, and I open. We get all the social videos of the box openings and the kids playing in the boxes and the kitties playing in the boxes. Kitties, like kittens.
Yeah, small cats.
Not kitties. And so, that is the dimension that we have chosen to disrupt on, that we have chosen to win on. We are focused on shipping faster, and there's a lot of amazing things that we're doing with McKillican on that. But those two dimensions are core to us, and we continue to drive to bring value to our customers' lives on those two experiences. And I would say, what's next for retail is figure out the axes on which you're disrupting and go hard at them and know the metrics and the leading indicators that drive them, and put the customer at the center of everything you do all day, every day. And thank you for being an amazing partner.
Question.
Hi, good afternoon. Quick question. We talked a little bit about the trust factors and the goodwill that has been built up in the business over the years. What are the kind of strategies in place from evolving from, smaller size businesses and the evolving growth of the business, and how you look at, I guess, the security and the frictionless aspect of protecting that customer experience and journey on your site, while expediting, I guess.
It's a great question, and it goes back to that trust factor you mentioned and we talked about, and you break the trust and there goes your brand. So what keeps me up at night, I always say this to the folks from Well.ca in the room, number one priority, health, safety, and security. Because if you don't have that, you've got nothing. And so we do look at a lens of how do we ensure the security, the privacy of our customer. There are a lot of SOPs in our organization around this, and I can tell you that those are the things that we are just maniacal about, for the customer, for the brand, just for the right thing to do, and we are constantly looking to improve. And so it is for any retailer, for any brand, if you don't have that trust of your customers and your employees, you've got nothing. So great question.
We've talked a lot about trust. What would you say are like the 3 key ways that you build and maintain that trust?
I would say the first one is consistency of your brand, that you are consistent about what your brand is, your value proposition, and your delivery on that value proposition. And so I think that makes a great brand. A brand isn't a name. A brand is truly the value proposition and your ability to execute on it every day, day in and day out, and bringing value to people's lives. And I think authenticity is another element of trust, of feeling that you're authentic and you tell me transparently what's going on, whether it's good or bad, right? You can still have trust. If you look at brands, sometimes not great things happen, but they still have trust because of how they dealt with the situation. And so I think that you have to keep that at the forefront of your mind. And so I think that consistency and that authenticity really contribute to the trust of your brand. And I think it is probably a little bit nuanced for every brand, and I think it's up to the brand to figure out what does trust mean from their consumers, right? Because I know as a consumer, for me, it may mean something different for this brand than it does for Well.ca. And so we do look at that for Well.ca, and those are 2 things that we are incredibly focused on to continue to build and maintain the trust of our consumers.
It's kind of around the same topic. I heard a stat just this week that misinformation online travels 70% faster. Yeah, right, and which is not surprising.
Except on April 1st, where we don't trust anything on the internet.
It's great to be listening to those communities, but I'm on those communities and there is a lot of misinformation. So do you see Well as having a role in a bit of education, and how do you protect yourself from jumping on maybe the wrong trend?
It's a great question, and I think that we are much more careful about the content that we produce that comes from Well.ca, and then we also think about how do you curate the content produced from user-generated content, and that's a challenge too, and how do you maintain the authenticity? And so I think for us, we need to be consistent and on brand with our content, and feel comfortable that we can stand behind it, and then allow for consumers, customers to have their choice and to have their say. And I think, as you said, you're on those communities, you pick and choose what you listen to, and you probably in your head can think of the algorithm that you apply to whether or not I'm going to take stock in what somebody is saying. If 30 other people jump on in the next 30 minutes and say the same thing, you're like, maybe there's value there. If nobody else, you're like, okay, I'm just going to next move on. So, but it is a very careful consideration, and trust is paramount with the consumer and with the brand.
Especially in the health and wellness space.
Yes.
I have one question.
Ah.
We had Ray Reddy here a few months ago from Ritual, and he said his #1 product was the grilled pork bao from Banh Mi Boys in the whole world. What is your #1 selling? Is there
It's a great question. For all of the beauty lovers out there, The Ordinary. So how many people here have heard of The Ordinary? All right, more people than I would have thought. But what's interesting is so we sell The Ordinary. We've come out with bundles, again, talking about how do you add value to people's lives. So they probably have now, 40 products, and they're not the easiest to understand what they do. They're very, component-based. So how can we add value? Here's Well.ca saying, here's the anti-aging bundle. These are the 3 products that you should use in this order, and here's some video content around it. And, the consumers really react to that, and we've seen that really pick up. And so thank you for the question. It is a great one. For those of you who are into skincare, check out The Ordinary. You can buy some Ordinary anti-aging bundles, one of our top-selling products.
Something that we hear in so many industries is the magic that is the millennial consumer. Must be on your radar. Are you noticing a shift? Because some of what we hear about the millennial consumer is they're very cause-generated, they're very loyal. How are you thinking about that? Because the millennials are on the early cusp of your client base.
Yeah, no, and the millennials now are pushing 40, right? So I think we talk about millennials like they're this younger demographic, but you really should be talking about Gen Z in terms of ones that are coming up. But millennials are definitely more cause-based. They're more willing to try new brands, and so they're more willing to switch. They are loyal to brands that they like, and they want to talk about them, so we see them talking about the things that they like a lot more. And, they are also willing to, take our brand, for example. They'll talk about our brand. You get older customers who are like, you're great, but I wouldn't go out telling my friends and family when we ask, because I just don't tell my friends and family where I do or what I do. But millennials will.
Yeah.
They'll talk about it, and they will share. And so really capitalizing on the asset that you have there, and again, focused on bringing value to their lives.
It's an interesting psychological shift because they'll talk about it, demo it, show you what they're doing in the most intimate of situations sometimes, which is such a shift from Gen X and older.
Absolutely.
Last question.
Hi, I'm Natalie from Team Rexall. Hello. I'm actually one of those. We have a WhatsApp group of moms who share their box photos when the Well.ca
there you
images
go.
are. And thank you to the buyer of the Galerie au Chocolat Espresso Dark Chocolate, because that is my fave. Our Rexall customers are telling us that they are surprised and delighted when they walk into a Rexall and they see the Well.ca section, and the fact that they can pick up their goodies, their Well.ca goodies from Rexall. How has that been doing for Well.ca, and do you see that continuing?
It's been doing incredibly well, and I think that again, the consumer is a whole being. There's not this here I am a physical shopper, here I am an online shopper. We're one person, we're one shopper, and we like interacting in many different ways with our brands, and it brings value to their lives. And I'll be honest, I was actually a little bit surprised when we offered click and collect in the Rexall stores. It can be delivered to your home. But if you're choosing to pick it up in a Rexall store, you're doing it because it's adding value to your life in some way. In some way, your life works better if you pick it up at a Rexall store than if it's delivered to your home. And there's a significant number of customers choosing that, and that's awesome because it's adding value to their lives. And it's bringing them more value because they can probably get something else they need at Rexall that is, again, adding value to their lives. So I think, again, consumer choice, bringing value into their lives, you're always going to win. And we hear it from our customers too. It's awesome. I can go into Rexall store and pick up some of my faves. You know, I personally I love Smart Sweets. So after hockey, the other day I didn't have any, and we stopped in a Rexall store, and I could grab some Smart Sweets from a Rexall store. And again, it's a healthy snack option for my kids, and I'm one shopper. I shop a lot online at Well.ca, but I even like being able to pick it up at Rexall. So.
Did anyone feel hard done by that they didn't have their question? Okay, this will be the real last one.
In terms of creating your brand loyalty and your client experience with your consumer base, how do you, what tools do you use to maintain that continued dialogue with them, understanding who your consumer is, and then offering up to them solutions by understanding, profiling them? What tools do you use to capture that data and to consumer profiling?
Yeah, and I think it's a great question because to really add value, you need to understand me. So what are the tools you're using to understand me? And then, therefore, what are you doing with that information? And so, obviously, we collect information on how they interact with their site, whether they purchase or they don't. We can see what they're, and it, you know, you can talk about how Big Brother is at, but I think us all as consumers understand now that as we move around the internet,
Yep, you're tracked. You know what you're doing. It's going to show up in your social feed.
And actually, that's an interesting one. We're very careful on dynamic remarketing because we know how kind of creepy that is. But as you're on our site,
I've noticed that actually.
Yeah, we're not as, again, we listen to our consumers and how are we adding value into their lives. And but understanding how they interact, what they're looking at, what they bought before, what they could buy in the future. We're taking a lot of information and we're distilling it into what are some actionable things that we can do. We're all overloaded by information. It's not the lack of information, it's how do you actually action it. And so we have, you know, whether it's through, you know, on-site personalization, email personalization, social, who we send content to, when we send it to, all of those things are dynamically worked on an ongoing basis. One size fits all doesn't work. There's no more mass marketing anymore. If you get mass marketing, you kind of feel a little bit insulted sometimes where you're like, this is not relevant to me. And so I would say that on loyalty, it's one, understanding what is your loyalty, like how do those cohorts interact? How are cohorts from years ago different from the cohort you acquired, you know, last month, and through what channel? And understanding the, you know, A/B testing. You did this and what was the reaction, and therefore trying to isolate what worked and what didn't work. And so I think if you build the DNA in your organization to, again, have that capability of constantly testing, learning, trying, failing, and looking at failing as actually winning because you learned something, and then acting on it again, that really helps you understand loyalty. And I think there's a whole question again onto loyalty programs and how do you bring value into the consumer, and how do you effectively use a loyalty program? And you know, that's an area that I can say at Well.ca we're continuing to evaluate and evolve. But I think you need to look at the loyalty of your existing customers because that customer base is incredibly valuable, and losing an existing customer and regaining them is much less costly than going out and acquiring a new one. And so you have to look at those already acquired customers as kind of like your holy grail. It's a great question. It does keep me up at night.
Let's clap for real people. Yes, they did a great job. Come on. Fantastic. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is David Simmons. I'm the Senior Vice President of Communications for McKesson and a board member here at the Canadian Club. It's an absolute pleasure to be part of a community that can welcome Rebecca to share the Well.ca story with all of you, to spend time with people like Anita, who inspires me. Every time she wears a fantastic outfit like she's wearing today, I feel so jealous. That red is just so Canadian of you, and I appreciate it. So thank you, Anita, for opening, for hosting us today. Donna, I was Googling on the internet, and I'm like following and flagging, spending my time on social media, so that's great. And like I said, Rebecca, as a colleague, it's great to have you here, and your story and Well.ca story is so wonderful. So thanks for being part of Team McKesson. As the world of retail continues to shift, and I can tell you that in our organization, we look at retail trends constantly, both as a B2B partner and increasingly as a B2C partner, we know that standing still is not an option and that we have to disrupt or be disrupted. And so we're so glad to have Rebecca on our team and to have Well.ca as part of our family. And especially for moments like this, where she can talk about trends and changes and different dynamics that are happening in the market. And I'm so glad. I felt like I was in a consumer focus group today, listening to all of you, so to continue to share your story about Well. Before I let you all go, I will say that we have other events that you could join us at here at the Canadian Club. Let me just make a comment that this is part of a new programming trend that we're doing here at the club, thanks to Colleen, where we have less formal lunch and we have no tables and no toast to the Queen. But if you're into the Queen like I am, you can join us at one of the following events and toast with me. On Monday, April 15th, we have the Honorable Carolyn Bennett, the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, will talk to us about the importance of reconciliation. I'll be there, and I think it's going to be fantastic. On Tuesday, we have a breakfast event with the Honourable Vic Fideli, Ontario's Minister of Finance, who will speak to us about the provincial budget. And we'll have a lunch event on Tuesday as well with Dan Doctoroff, Chairman and CEO of Sidewalk Labs, who will talk to us about city building. So we hope you can attend with us. I'd like to extend one more thank you to Rebecca, to Donna for being here today, for sharing their story, and for being part of this conversation. Thank you to MediaEvents.ca, Canada's online event space, and VCC for live streaming today's event, and especially to the DMZ Sandbox for the wonderful space, and for PeopleTale for the promotional help. That was a sentence. Look at that. Wanting a comma, but that's okay. We're glad that you chose to have lunch with us. Please join us again soon. Bye-bye, everybody.